This public hearing will please come to order. It is now 7:07 p.m. on July 11, 2023. I'm Anna Tennell, Chair of Planning and Zoning Commission. Other commission members who are present include Stephen Siccardi, James Laporta, Keith Bodwell, and Bruce Bennett, alternate, is here. He will be seated for Christine Ray. In compliance with state law, a transcript must be made of everything that is said at any public hearing of the Planning and Zoning Commission. We are doing this by means of a video that is being recorded for us by Richard Griggs. I will now turn the hearing over to our zoning enforcement officer, Karen Nelson, to read the legal notice in the record.
Okay, this legal notice appeared in the Waterbury Republican June 29th and July 11th. It was also posted with Vera Denis, the town clerk, on the 27th of June. It reads, legal notice, town of Cornwall, notice of public hearing, Planning and Zoning Commission. The Cornwall Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, July 11th, 2023, commencing at 7 p.m. in the Cornwall Library, 30 Pine Street, to hear the following application. SP 255, Lauren Taggart and Baxter Wasson, owners, applicants, special permit for detached accessory apartment as per section 810, apartment uses in residential zones, 169 Green Hill Road. At this public hearing, interested persons may appear and be heard and written communications received. A copy of the application is available for review in the land use office, Cornwall Town Offices, 20 Pine Street, dated this 27th day of June 2023. By myself, Karen Nelson, Land Use Administrator. And for the record, I will state that everything that you have gotten electronically, which was a narrative, a site plan, electronic copy of a site plan for proposed pool house guest at 169 Green Hill Road, owned by Lauren Taggart Wasson and Baxter Wasson, prepared by Brian FPE, that was sent electronically to you. We also have several large copies in case anybody would like to see them. Torrington Area Health was forwarded to you, the narrative was forwarded to you, and I have received from Brian notices to the abutting neighbors, or certified notices sent to abutting neighbors. All good. So all is in order at this point, and I have received nothing in terms of any written communications via snail mail or email.
So I will now ask Brian Neff, who's speaking on behalf of the applicant, to present the plans. I told Mr. Neff you should stand on the table and we can all cluster around. Okay, it's nice and big. We like looking at maps.
So for the record, I'm Brian Neff, licensed engineer, representing the owners. I drew the site plan that shows the proposed accessory detached dwelling unit. Just to kind of briefly review this, it's got a long winding driveway that goes to Green Hill Road. There's an easement that connects up to the road, which is shown on the little key plan in the corner. It's a 10.3 acre parcel. There's an existing single-family dwelling on the property. The owners would like to get approval for an accessory detached dwelling unit, which would also serve as a pool house since it's in close proximity to their existing swimming pool. The building itself contains one bedroom, one bathroom, and a kitchen.
And not a single closet.
Well, I guess they'll have a armoire or something like that in the corner. I don't know. I'm not really a decorator.
Okay.
But it's, yeah, it's what the owners apparently would like to have.
Okay.
So the size of the unit is 922.5 square feet. So it's within the regulated limitations of the square footage. There's a separate septic system that serves the building that's been approved by the health district.
May I ask a question about that too? Am I supposed to let him finish before we ask questions?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Well, just to review the auxiliary things that go along with it, there's a septic system that's shown on the plan. which has been approved by the health district. The proposal is to use the existing water supply well, which piping would come from the house to the proposed house. It's a single one-story building, kind of an efficiency apartment type thing. On the reverse of the plan here, I can show you what the floor plan looks like.
Do you have the square footage off hand?
922.5. So this is the proposed floor plan here. Bedroom, kind of a living area, kitchen, one bathroom. Well, again, they can use it as something of a pool house also, if it's not used as a detached dwelling unit. It's got everything that qualifies it to be that. So I think it's logical to go through the process and get the approval of this, since it contains all of the necessary parts and pieces. So let me flip this back to the map again. There's no wetlands or water courses identified on the site. There's a big amount of buildable area technically on the site. I didn't put a box in here because basically the entire site would qualify as being buildable area. So it's well in excess of the minimums. I did include some proposed work on the driveway. There's a septic spur that comes off the main driveway to the road that goes down to the proposed house and the pool site. It's going down a relatively steep hill, so there's provisions proposed to upgrade that driveway, pave that driveway, because it's over 10%. So that's included. I've also shown a parking area for 2 vehicles with some radiuses included that would handle a fire truck in terms of turning around for emergency services. So that's kind of the description of the property. I did write the narrative that's part of the file, which gives a very detailed description of the proposal.
I'm going to add one thing. Brian and I talked about this because it came in and there was a question in my mind whether it was a detached accessory apartment based on the fact that there appeared to be a bedroom, the better part of a kitchen, and a bathroom. So it was decided that it was going to come in under a detached accessory apartment. And the other pieces, I have been on this site and I agree completely with Brian's assessment as to the driveway. I had to go down and do inspections to the pool and to turn around and whatever with a car with the space when it was under construction was an issue. So the changes to the driveway to make it driveway to address emergency access is very appropriate.
So that's existing driveway except for the turnaround?
Yeah, this already exists down here, but this is going to be improved, the section, and adding a good sized parking area there also.
Your slope is this one?
Actually sloping down this way.
This way.
And the numbers are there.
So we've got the,
12
it's closing into 15% toward the bottom. So it's a relatively steep hill. Needs some regrading and again, paving of the surface. So I've got a detail showing the paving on the plan.
Just 2-foot contours?
These are tents.
So now is the stage in the public hearing in which the commissioners may ask questions. And mine was, why a 1,000-gallon septic tank for a 1-bedroom?
It's a minimum requirement for
It is. We can't really do anything less than 1,000.
Listening.
It'll cover up to 3 bedrooms, but that's the minimum required by code.
I didn't understand that. Okay,
Yeah.
Thanks.
Is this stone wall existing? The stone walls
It
all around
is.
the property?
It is. These stone walls are all existing. They're not, they haven't been approved, they're just kind of stacked walls. So they're not a fancy kind of a wall by any means.
Do they have pull-offs along the driveway, the old driveway for fire hydrants?
There are some pull-offs along the way. That's more towards there's a straightaway here, they've got a pull-off, and then around the front, they've got a pull-off also.
Ben Diamond.
I know it.
Quite.
The pool is new, right?
Yeah, that's relatively new.
Yeah.
So that's been completed.
Any other questions from commissioners?
Setbacks, meets the setbacks, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
It's
showing
setback
the
lines.
the zoning setback lines, this is in excess of that's 70 feet off the sideline, which the regular setback is 40 feet. So it's a good 30 beyond the minimum setback.
Nicely done.
Would you point out where the solar panels are?
Well, I wasn't really involved in that whole permitting process for solar panels, but they're down the lower part of the property, which I guess they're working on that now. That's quite a distance away from the house and the
Sure is.
proposed pool.
They don't understand.
The question came up about setbacks to solar panels, which they're obligated to comply with, which also triggered the discussion of the septic system, because had the wiring gone in, it would have gone probably through the area of the septic system.
I did do a little sketch recommending, a route that they take around the septic area, which I believe that they've done.
Yes.
Yeah, they don't want to do a Murphy's Law thing to have to go through the middle of the septic area. Wouldn't be good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks very much. And at this stage, I will open the floor to public comment, and here you are again.
No comments.
Welcome to your third meeting. It's not going to be as light as your last one.
In that case, I would accept a motion to close the hearing.
So moved.
Seconded by James and Steve. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No opposed. Hearing is closed. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Moving on to the, you don't have to stay.
It's okay.
Oh, you want to wait for
I'll
that? Our regular meeting. And that is starting at 7:19 p.m. on July 11th. Do I have to go through who's here again, Karen? Okay. So first up is approval of minutes. Anybody want to move?
So moved.
Thank you, Keith.
Second.
James, you're slow tonight. Tired. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. New applications, none. Pending applications, the Taggart Lawson special permit. Is there any discussion among the commissioners? Okay,
I move that we approve the,
I have a detailed motion for approval, since we are, if we're going to approve, we have to state why. Does anybody have any questions before I say so? I will accept a motion to approve this special permit application because it conforms with the following regulations, and these are the old format regulations since the application was received by us before the effective date of the new ones. And I'll pass this along to you in written format, Karen. 8.10.1 through 8.10.6, apartment uses in residential zones. 8.1 through 8.8, general requirements for special permits. 6.6.1 through 6.6.2, site plan requirements. And finally, 10.3.1 through 10.3.12, driveway regulation. I will just mention for everyone in the room that 8.7 does require that the special permit must be recorded on the land record before the permit goes into effect. And that's up to the owners to do. They can contact Karen and she'll show them how.
I would ask that you add to the motion, as per the site plan, being part of the record, with the name of the site plan, the engineer, and the date
Okay?
on it.
Okay?
Torrington Area Health approval, and the narrative made part of the record.
Okay. I said all that and we will type it in to the minutes. So it's been moved. Any seconds?
Second.
James, all in favor? Aye.
Great, thank you.
You did a great job. That's really a beautiful plan.
Many thanks.
Thank you.
Wow. Next, staff report.
Number one, I will quickly address the zoning permits that are all approved at this point, which is a pool at 101 Dibble Hill Road, a expansion of a single-family residence and installation of a pool at 285 Cream Hill Road, and an 18 by 26 pole barn for storage at 54 College Street. That's Jean Boudelier, your tax collector. I would like to address the fact that there are no enforcement actions on the plate. You will be seeing a zoning permit that has been submitted in response to a wetlands enforcement action, and until wetlands can render a decision on this permit, and then it will come to you for review.
Okay. For our next meeting?
Probably not.
Okay. Correspondence and communications?
I have nothing except all the communications that you put into the record.
Okay. Anybody have any other business proper to come before the commission?
Let's see, I had a comment about, you had requested some input on a letter. What was that letter about? We were spacing on
Was
it.
it,
Is it the Housatonic River?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the future, is it possible for us to, rather than having to do that via email, to actually,
Do it at a meeting.
yeah, I think all that stuff would be better.
I agree
served.
with you, James.
And it should just be a policy that's, we don't do stuff.
Yeah.
It's just a minimum 1 month time period as opposed to, it shouldn't be a rush thing. I think it adds too much extra pressure on the chairperson as well,
Yeah.
in order to try to make all that stuff happen.
It was kind of a strange way that it came about. It was a request made at the Board of Selectmen's meeting for input. And you understand the background story.
It's just I know.
But I appreciate,
There's going to be unique situations all the time, right?
yeah, I appreciate your
possible.
comment very much. Doing business by email is not ideal, and
Yeah.
I would cease and desist.
You had to do what you had to do in that case, but I think in general that would be, it'd be nice to be able to operate as a commission rather than trying to do one-off.
Right.
And I will add to the whole issue of email. Some of you have seen some emails come out from my office regarding the receipt of information outside of public hearings. When a public hearing is set, the motion is set, that is when communications can be received. Communications prior to a public hearing, or if no public hearing is set, are not appropriate. And we were the Wetlands Commission was in a difficult situation, which is misunderstanding as to what people could say and do. We received communications which were not completely related to wetlands, and it put the commission and staff in a difficult position with letters and phone calls about why, that there was going to be conversation. And I sought legal counsel, and we handled it as best as we could.
It's part and parcel of the fact that zoning regulations in general and how you're to behave in a public hearing are not, our general public is not as well informed as we would wish they could be. And I'm constantly trying to figure out, and we should all be constantly working on ways, figuring out ways to help spread the word. Planning workshop. Yay.
I have one thing to add on just that point that you just stated, Chair, regarding educating the public. There might be a way, just so that expectations around public hearings and the receipt of applications, just a simple one-pager that goes up on the website of the purpose of a public hearing. I've prepared them many times, and it's just a template that pretty much says, like, this is what the commission does, this is their process. It walks them through, and it's more for the audience and also the applicant so that they know what to expect. But I can pass that
You
along.
can pass it along, but it was conveyed to its people.
Yeah.
And the other thing you can do with that is put it on the seats of the chairs if you have. We've done that in the past, right? So people can read it as they come in and not be surprised when they're not allowed to burst out in the middle of the public hearing. and
Yeah,
say
it's
something.
not a bad idea.
Can we put that up on the website when you're noticing public hearing?
That's what,
Is
that's
that
what
what
the
you were
legal
saying?
notice goes up to.
Yeah.
It reads,
The purpose of this public hearing.
is to, and written communications can be received prior and at the public hearing, written and oral communication. Persons may appear and be heard at the public hearing, oral written communications, or written communications sent to the land use office will remain part of the record, which I always read into the record.
Is it too legal easy, or do you think people will?
I think it's pretty
It's all right.
good. And if it's up, you know, absolutely.
Well, I think you're making a point because this is the way we've been posting public hearings for forever. And people still, it doesn't sink in. Although,
Maybe if you get a cartoon on it.
well, and I've developed a little speech that I could have made tonight if I'd seen a dozen people in the audience about, the need to speak clearly, identify yourself. If you feel your opinions represent an expert opinion, please state your qualifications. And finally, address all comments to the commission, not the applicant, and be sure to be courteous. That's what I was going to say,
Yeah.
but I didn't need to.
The other piece, though, is if communications are sent to commission members and they are not made part of the record, and then it comes out during the hearing that there have been conversations, written communications between an active commission member, it puts a commission member at risk.
Of course.
Karen, at the bottom of the agenda, if you add just a disclaimer, like for consideration of all correspondence, please contact and provide your email, is that already there? Because it's changed.
Yes.
Yes, so we
It's
just
right on there.
saying it.
The Cornwall P&Z Commission welcomes public comment in written form, snail mail, or emails addressed to landuse@cornwallct.gov. Such comments received 24 hours prior to the start of the hearing will be shared with all commissioners and acknowledged as part of the public hearing.
That's, yeah.
It's a basic, there are also certain recurring communication problems. I'll give you an example. An older woman here in town who's lived here as long as I have came up to me at a public event and asked me if it was too late to submit a cannabis survey. And I said, yes, I'm sorry, it was. And she said, well, I only just found out about them. How did you go about making sure everybody knew about it? So I listed it. I went through the whole list. And she was chagrined and acknowledged that, it was too bad. She somehow missed it anyway. And then her final statement, which is very familiar to me, was, I wish you had put it in the post office. And if you guys remember, during our town plan, we had a survey. And I went around to the post offices and put copies there. And we had twice as many responses to that survey as we had to the cannabis.
Or you may put it as a document.
A
rather than
document.
not stuck-
This
stuck
for
on the
someone
wall.
to pick up and with, telling them where to turn it in. And the reason is, if you look at our census data, the median age in Cornwall has been going steadily up, year in, year out. We are now older than any of the other towns in Northwest Connecticut. I just looked at some of those numbers. The average age in Washington is 48.8. The average age in Salisbury is 52. The average age in Cornwall is somewhere between, I think it's
81.
median, not average. I should use the word median. The median is 53.4.
What is it?
52.4.
All my kids aren't doing anything to bring that down.
Make more.
So, you know, not everybody uses social media or web-based. And we want to be able to communicate with them. So I'm going to remember that conversation the next time we have something
Yeah.
to hand out or want to help people understand more. Let's talk about accessory dwelling units. The handout from Janelle, did you make us copies?
Yeah.
She's
Everybody passing them on to that place.
And it was just like going back to the reformatting days.
Was it? Did it feel that good? Did it feel that good?
Oh, I got them all over the place.
So,
Well, I think you should go through it, you know.
okay, so I'm keeping this as a standalone document for now because it's easier to work with than the entire set of the regulations. And essentially what we're addressing is Article 10.1. So all of our special uses are in that article. And right now the title of that article is accessory apartments and apartment uses. And so the memo that I prepared, it just outlines a little bit of background why we are preoccupied with this particular topic at this moment. A little bit of a push came from Public Act 2129, which was from the state regarding many things, including accessory apartments. If you recall, during our COVID times when we were on Zoom, we opted out of the state language. It was suggested by many land use attorneys to do so because if you didn't opt out, you would need to adopt Section 6 of Public Act 2129 verbatim. And there were elements in Section 6 of 2129 verbatim that we were questioning, and also when the commission was having the discussion, the sense that I really got from the members is that Cornwall could do something significantly different and or more unique to just addressing accessory apartments within the town. So we opted out, long story short, and now that we've gone through the rewrite, which is the reorganization of the regulations, we're now at the point where we can touch the substance. There was that prioritization worksheet that our chair prepared at last meeting, and if you recall, accessory apartments was a common theme. The subcommittee did meet at a point and had 3 suggestions for all of us. I've incorporated those suggestions into the language that I am putting forth as a proposal, and those elements include removing the owner occupancy requirement. If you recall, there's a section in the regulations, it's a bit problematic because it really stipulates who can dwell in an accessory apartment, and it's incredibly specific about those very particular family members that can and cannot dwell in accessory apartments. So the suggestion from the subcommittee was to take that out. Also to allow for accessory apartments detached or attached by zoning permit. So right now, if you recall, they're all going through the special permitting process, which we just witnessed. It seemed like a relatively benign application. We didn't really have that much of a outraged audience here before us. So the thought process behind that is just to streamline the application process, make it a little less expensive, less arduous for just a zoning permit, provided a lot of requirements need to happen anyway. So Torrington Area Health still needs to sign off on any septic. Karen, as the CEO, would still be looking at an engineered site plan to make sure that there's compliance. It just wouldn't come before the commission as a public hearing. And then the third point of that subcommittee would be to update the parking requirements. If you were to recall, this is a carryover from what the state is suggesting. It is really suggesting to make housing a bit of a more achievable outcome, to not require more parking when there is an accessory apartment. So the regulations as written require 3 for a dwelling unit with an accessory apartment, but only 1 for a dwelling unit on its own. So it's a bit incongruous. Like, why all of a sudden do we need this much more parking if it's just for an additional dwelling unit? In our small towns, we're very lucky. Parking is not hard to come by and or typically expensive. But when we do look in areas that are a little more dense, like the village, or West Cornwall rather, we really do see parking can be an issue. So streamlining that, and then the memo gets into the suggested language. Just so everyone is aware of all changes being suggested, I did write this with strike-throughs, so that one can also look at the language that exists as written, with all of the suggested language being in red. The printout that I believe most people have does not have the red. I can certainly pull my copy if we want to highlight all of the changes that are being suggested. But it does stick with the organization of what's currently in the regulation, and there's some questionable language that did get taken out. A lot of that was around very specific size limitations that really would be dictated if it doesn't comply with building code as being habitable. The question came like, why these very specific sizes? But it does carry over the concept that an accessory apartment is clearly going to be smaller than your primary dwelling unit. That has remained in there. So I don't know if we want to go through this line by line.
I don't.
Or if we want to highlight specific areas where there may or may not be questions.
Can you go over the size stuff again? A little more?
Yeah, of course. So the first point, and I'm kind of looking at Bruce's copy because he has the lovely red. Sorry to hover and pull your paper. So the first section that size gets mentioned, I believe is on page 2. It's going to be number 1 under a special permit. And this is where there is a requirement for a special permit if it's greater than this 1,200 square feet. That has stayed in. And I've also thrown out the language, this has been talked about, and this is an important change, that a second accessory dwelling unit, attached or detached, could be approved if they go through special permit. So that's a new element that's in there. I don't know who brought it up, but I know
We
it was
discussed it, but it
discussed.
wasn't, I don't know if we agreed to put it in, but this would be a good moment to
So that makes
discuss
it, you could
that.
have an apartment, a second, and/or a secondary building. You
Right.
could actually have 2 secondary buildings, is that what we're?
I don't think that's our intent. I mean, I think what we discussed was you could have an accessory apartment in your home, which
Right.
some people do, quite a few people do. And then you could have a second one in an accessory dwelling.
Yeah, separated from the house.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I'm not picturing, 2 accessory apartments, one in the garage and one in the barn.
But does that leave us open for 2 separate buildings?
I would definitely specify.
She would fix the wording.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't think that wording that you have there now does.
If it's the intent of the commission.
Well,
Yeah,
We're waiting to hear from everyone.
yeah.
Thoughts?
I think, yeah, Lisa's point is good, but I think that's a good catch that we would probably, personally, I think that would be weird to allow 2 separate buildings with an accessory apartment each, separate from your main residence. So
Right.
if you've got one accessory apartment in your main dwelling unit, and then you decide to have an accessory building, that's, I think, could be allowed under special permit.
Under special permit.
And an
Yes.
accessory
It's
apartment,
easy
and what about non-residential?
Say that again?
A detached accessory apartment, but there are many properties that have other accessory buildings that are not residential.
Right.
Yeah, you can have a shed and a barn and
Yeah.
a goat.
Yeah, but, this town is plumb full of those accessory dwellings, accessory buildings. And we don't really want every one of them be turned into an apartment.
Right.
We need to do it in a very controlled,
Little camp village,
I know,
right?
right?
That's like one residential lot with,
Yeah.
a couple extra.
But,
I think that
so-
would be strange.
to summarize, I think what we're saying is, with just a zoning permit, you can have either an accessory apartment inside your home, or one in one of your outbuildings.
You could have an additional accessory apartment, could be in, could be out, could be attached, detached, whatever, right?
And then whatever you have, already, you can have the opposite with a special permit. Let's say you start out with an accessory apartment that's detached, and then you decide you want to put one inside your house too because you have a really big house.
Well, could you put the two in your house? Could you have your main house and then two?
Well, then it
additional
becomes
accessory
apartment
apartments?
conversion.
Yeah, then it would be
Yeah,
a
that's-
three, then that would be multifamily.
Right. Because in our current regs, don't we have there's a separate section for that up to 4?
Yeah.
Mhm. We'll get to that actually, because it's wrapped into this
Okay.
10.1 as an apartment use. It actually fell into that
Oh, good,
10.1 section, so we do get to
I
that.
like where you're heading there, James.
But I think the important note to specify would be only one attached and one detached can be allowed per lot.
Yeah,
There you
period.
go. There you go.
And yeah, that needs to be really clearly specified. The one thing that comes to mind is just those that have slipped under the radar that we're just not aware of.
Well, yes. I mean, I recently was asked to give advice informally through a secondary person. But what I learned was that somebody has a large house that's being sold, and it turns out that there's an accessory apartment inside that house. And nobody, the person speaking on the owner's behalf didn't know whether they had a permit for it or not. The real estate agent was advertising the property as having the possibility of a second residential unit in one of the accessory buildings. That was part of the real estate agent's come on. So I was being asked what I thought of all of that.
As a private citizen.
As a private citizen.
Ideal. That would go.
And I said that the homeowner most definitely should go and speak to the land use
Right.
official
Right answer.
before they give people false information. So it's I've been as I work my way through our history, I've been keeping a database of every accessory apartment that went through the channels, and I'm up to 80.
80?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
How many of the current owners know that there was a special permit for an accessory apartment in there?
So that brings us to another point, and that is when they go through special exception process, the requirement is to file all special exceptions on the land records.
Right. We've had this discussion before.
So when we get to page 3, no, it's okay, I'm just,
Here, in point 4 on page 2, C.4. Prior to any commencement of construction and/or the establishment of use, the owner shall file a copy of the zoning permit for the accessory dwelling unit on the town land records. And, we need to make sure of that.
yeah, and that is carried
That's carried over from our old reg said that too, but
I think a lot of the disconnect over the years, in not just Cornwall, but in other towns, is that special permits were sent out when somebody expected to file it and they never did.
yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But-
It's common in every town.
But over the years too, there's always been failure to, when you file a special permit, you're supposed to clearly tie it to the owner, to the lot number, block lot, or
Right.
whatever, and even identify the map. And in past years,
They didn't do it.
yeah, because it was just said something, there's something here on that lot, and somebody did it. And
So
then
can we go back and,
you
Can you go back?
can try to correct things if there's a question,
Yeah.
you can.
But moving forward, we can try to have a higher standard.
Yeah, but also in terms of validating something that's on the property in order to move forward on something else, you can incorporate you can clean it effects by pulling them in and making them part of the public record. It was the record of this is now being validated, there's a record of that that's being validated, and then it gets put on, and there's no questions that somebody goes in and they go in the vault, and it is there, and it's not an argument.
So can you do that in your free time?
Well, you just do it as they come along.
Oh, so from this point on, instead of going back?
Yeah, because you really can't go back and file something, because oftentimes there's a change of property owner.
Right.
So,
Moving forward, what if there's a template for every time there's a new accessory apartment, and then it's just a template of information where it's, this is your certification of your accessory dwelling unit, and these are the details, and it's all, it's templated, so it's provide your map, your block, your lot, the property owner's name, the address, the date of
see, I
approval,
do
the
those.
site plan name.
I do the special permits to be filed, because I will go back and validate the fact that the information has to be correct. Because that's how we were taught, I was taught years ago, that any permit to be put on land records had to have the information for title searcher to be able to travel.
So you transfer all that same kind of information
That's
that
correct.
Janelle was talking about for you.
Right down to the map. That
I'm surprised there's enough room.
Oh, no, it's only,
And then it's laminated and given to the client to put on their door of the accessory apartment.
well, it's in the lender's record.
See?
It's in the
I got
lender's
my
record,
permission.
so there's no questions about the validity of something.
But then it's also worth noting, Karen, how many complaints have you had since you've been here about illegal accessory apartments?
Oh, God. Well, I find them. So we
Whether
find-
you want
but-
to or not.
But we have validated a fair amount, and by,
Yeah.
Another important point is just the size. So when we get into,
Let's talk about
we're on page 2, and it's E. If you see a special permit is currently required for an accessory dwelling unit greater than 1,200 square feet. So that's a carryover. And my question for everyone is, does that trigger a special permit?
I think the consensus, we've talked about this on more than one occasion. The consensus was that we thought that was adequate as an accessory apartment, and that we probably would want to cap it at that unless there's some special, right?
So,
So it
yeah.
could be a special
permits.
Right.
So if they want more than 1,200 square feet, they go for a special
Yeah.
permit.
Yeah, I think that's good.
And have to
I
justify.
mean, where do you
why.
put it, at 1,800 or 2,000?
Right.
Yeah.
1,200 is good.
Yeah, okay.
And we also have in here that it's got to be less than the main dwelling. Right?
Right.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
I
that-
think we should keep that.
That is absolutely, I mean, well, that's what makes something primary and something accessory.
Otherwise, you could have just a lot with two same-size houses, and that might be a little.
But it would give people the opportunity, if they really want to build a 1,500 square foot apartment, that they can come before us and justify it. How would they justify it?
I
Maybe
guess.
they have a 7,000 square foot.
I was just
main
gonna
house.
say,
Right.
if,
Yeah, 100 acres, and they want to put it out.
Okay, all right, well, those are all.
I don't see why we can't,
That's
with
all.
100 acres, why not put 15
Believe me.
tiny houses, and it still would be less impact than.
that's, why can't I mean, that's just a common question. What's the problem with that?
Well, when we have such big zoning in Cornwall, and
You don't have to worry about setbacks. If you can't get all that in 5 acres, you got a problem.
So then moving on to the conversions, so if you get to page 3, you'll see G. Much of this is strike through. It's a conversion of existing single-family dwellings and/or accessory structure to 3 or 4 dwelling units. And I'm recalling it adaptive reuse, and it's conversion of a single family to multifamily, because that's what it is essentially.
Yeah.
And I'm basically saying an application for this conversion to a multifamily dwelling shall meet the standards and special permit requirements and satisfy general standards and all of the following provisions. So this is going to need a special permit. And then this is a carryover where that maximum livable floor area for each apartment is going to be that 1,200 square feet. that's different than what you see on page 2. This is a cap, and this is carried over, so I just want to know if you want it to be capped like this at a very specific square footage,
They have to go through a special permit.
no matter what.
Anyway,
Yeah,
I'd say get rid of the cap.
I would too, I think.
You gotta go through a special permit, so
you do,
they have to
for
come before
any
us anyway.
conversion.
Right.
And I want everyone to note too, this is another important point. So number one of the general standards is to be eligible, the building has to be 15 years old. I don't know why one building has a right to be converted versus another building just based on its age.
Is the idea to keep people from building a building just to convert it next year?
I have a sneaking suspicion of why it's in there and the intent. However, in modern times, when I read it as a contemporary person, the intent gets lost. And it seems like, why are we allowing an old home a certain right, but a new home something different? And if someone wants to build a new home and then convert it to apartments,
Yay.
they can just do it via special permit with this provision in there. So
There was, I think unfortunately, I was
I
on
think-
the commission at the time that
Yeah.
discussion was, but then, yeah, like the grandpa. But anyways, that was because at the time, we were talking about enabling a lot of older homes that people, might have a large Victorian or something that's just not utilizable very well for a one-family residence anymore. And we thought rather than let that space go to waste, it would be great to be able to allow those buildings to be converted. So
The original regulation required that they be at least 45 years old. Now, you and I voted to reduce it to 50.
right?
wow.
And now we're going to vote to reduce it
Or,
to 0.
or the other thought is, what if it's just an existing building? So and this is really a question for the commission. So because it's the subject is adaptive reuse, we're looking at the new use of something that already exists. So do we throw in there that it must be an existing building in order for there to be a conversion? And when we get to the greater housing conversation, discuss where new multifamily can potentially go.
Well, where do we draw the line at existing? Is it 1 year? Is it 5 years? Is it?
That's why-
Existing is pretty obvious, where it's,
What's pretty
when they come
They
in,
build it this year and they convert it next
when
year.
they come in for the special permit, that there's a building there. And if if anyone wants to pull a fast one on the town and go ahead and do this, it's sort of like, there's that one exception that might happen.
Right,
And
But they gotta go through a special permit,
What?
so.
right.
Well, the intent of the thing was to not promote the developer to come in to specifically do that. Now, maybe that intent has changed with our modern, right? But
Right.
the intent
Well,
was
now-
that we didn't want,
Yeah, that's
the whole
understood.
purpose of it was for reuse, not for new
Build
apartments. We
apartments.
didn't, if you want to build it for.
But, now we're in a housing crisis.
Right, so. I'm
But
not
the
saying-
title requires that it's an adaptation of an existing building.
For
And
this
the way
section,
that
yeah.
it reads too, it says an application for conversion of an existing
Right.
single-family dwelling. So existing, at the time of their application, they'll have to exist as a single-family
And I think
dwelling.
that protects us from somebody coming in.
Yeah.
Just
So we can discuss later another section to add apartments if we want.
And if it's an unfinished single-family dwelling and they come forward with a special permit, I would say, you're not an existing single-family dwelling, you're actually
You don't have a
unfinished.
CO.
You never got your CO.
Right.
And that's where you can,
That's a
And nobody's
very
gonna
good
build a
point.
place with 4 kitchens.
Get their CO.
Right, yeah, I mean, if you're coming in from the get-go, and planning for all this extra plumbing, because you're gonna actually have a floor.
Right.
Do you wanna take that risk though, before you go in for your special permit, spending all that money?
No, you probably just come in for a special permit and try to build a 4-family unit.
Right.
Yeah,
and
Wow.
so bear in mind, we will have to get to that conversation around where to allow for multifamily. This is not the conversation we're having this evening. This is just around addressing, should we wish to update what's currently at 10.1 around the conversion of existing single family. we will get into this other broader multifamily discussion.
Well, I think
Not
this would be
today.
an easier bill to swallow for the town, the general public, because it's kind of already in there now, it makes more sense, rather than opening up.
Something brand new.
Yeah, so I
That
think
would be
for
fine.
baby steps
One step at a
purpose,
time,
this
yeah.
might be great.
And just to your point, James, ever since Public Act 2129, so we all recall there is a provision within Public Act 2129 that requires all towns to provide for multifamily housing. It doesn't make the most sense for small towns like ours without the built-out infrastructure and the natural proclivity towards density. However, we have to show a good faith effort that we're allowing it in particular areas.
We do have a regulation that allows multifamily housing by the town or not-for-profit, like Cornwall Housing Corporation.
We do. This is another way of, if it should ever come up,
We're working on it.
that we're working on it and we're doing it thoughtfully and diligently in a way that works for Cornwall.
Right.
So just the thought to think through. But I do know.
Well, you know, there are, I haven't got the data at my fingertips, but we have a surprising number of 7-bedroom homes in this town. And, you know, they're all older homes. They date from an era when people had that many children. Times have changed, so you could see a house like that being converted to a 3-family unit.
No, it's a good regulation for it. I think.
Pardon me?
I think it's a good regulation to have and allow
Yeah,
for that.
Good.
you know,
good. Okay, and I'm comfortable with what Janelle has said about that word existing and how that will be interpreted. Anybody else?
Because you're really not gonna come in, build a house, finish it all, get it all done to the point of CO, and then
I can't imagine.
6 months later go and rip half of it out.
Doesn't- Unless
Doesn't
you're
make
a
financial sense.
multi-millionaire, and then you don't need to go through all this crap.
No, I like how you kind of scratched out all the exterior modification detail. A lot of them, I agree that, I think that was overstepping some.
It's not really the commission's
Yeah.
purview. There is, the language that has remained is if you look at page 2, it still does read that if you're including,
Exterior
modifications to a single-family dwelling for apartment use shall maintain the appearance, so we're getting rid of character, the appearance of the exterior, especially the public roadway facing facade, which shall have only one entrance, and exterior stairways shall be located only on the rear or side of the building. So that is a carryover. My understanding of that intent, which is the intent of many regulations for accessory dwelling units, is it should look like a single-family house if it is within the existing dwelling unit. It shouldn't blatantly have 2 doors, is what seems to really be something that people don't like to see from the road.
So this doesn't have anything to do with the architecture of the building?
It should not,
So
because it's
then
not your
someone could
purview.
change the complete architecture of a colonial into contemporary, you know,
Oh, they have.
vertical
They can
siding?
All the time, yeah.
Cornwall
We have
is
no
full
control
of
over that.
Unless
very
you
weird
have a
buildings
historic
hidden away.
district commission,
Historic district, yeah.
Huh?
Is this
or
a-
it's a salary board.
Is this a historic district?
No,
You have to get it
It's
special
not?
designated. Yeah.
Now, we wouldn't want to.
that
We
was,
wouldn't?
no.
So there's 2 ways towns can have those tools. Architecture review board in specific zones, should you feel there's a very specific zone that you, the appearance and the aesthetic is a requirement, and or historic district, but you do need to go through a very formal designation.
I mean, even Kent Main Street is
Sharon?
restricted.
Boy, I have
Sharon.
trouble
Sharon
figuring out
Ridgefield.
how to paint my own house. I don't want to decide what to do with somebody else's.
Just think about the appearance of this building that you're sitting in. But what does the library,
Well, this is a barn, so that would be consistent with, you know, what they built in the middle of Kent, that big giant square
The bank?
contemporary building.
Okay.
No, the art storage building.
Oh, that's strange.
That was approved by the,
It's probably because it's not, there's no regulations to stop the guy.
yes, it was. Yeah, there's an environmental, there's a design control group in Kent that passed that.
We don't have it.
We don't have anything like that. No.
It obviously doesn't work.
That's what everybody said.
You're right.
I don't want to live in a town that they tell me what's code.
But the other piece is the adaptation of older structures.
Right.
Somebody who lives in one, to be able to continue,
Right.
be multi-generational, and not knock the whole thing down because whatever you do is never going to be energy efficient or whatever.
Right.
And some of the older buildings,
Right.
you have to look at the fact that you might lose some of the character in order for them to be sustainable.
Right, yeah.
One thing that I don't understand, well, I do and don't, but the whole front of the house, this road facing side or whatever, you live in a house like mine where it's up in the woods, where you can see what the front of the house looks like anyway.
But no, so the language was modified, so it's public roadway, it could say visible from the public roadway instead of the public facing. Right now, it's been changed from front.
Because we have the same thing with our parking too for the home-based business. Didn't we, something about the parking, you have to not be in the front of the...
Yeah, we should start using words like that. I mean, because this is a good discussion.
You own 100 acres in
What we
places.
really mean is,
50 acres in the
But
woods.
then it's-
what disturbs the public,
Right.
these poor sensitive people as they drive by their cars and just,
If you own 100 acres and your house is 50 acres into the woods,
So
Well, you don't.
here's what
We
you
have 10 doors.
You don't, so there's a hypotheticals that,
But, you
Well,
that's not the
know,
case.
Well,
so let's find the right
I
word.
don't care what James's house looks like, because I'm not.
Then you discriminate, you say, well, he's got 100 acres and you only got
I don't think it
2.
hurts to maintain.
And so you don't want to see your house. His house is beautiful.
well, some of them, I wouldn't know which road would be the closest.
yeah, I mean.
How would you, yeah.
The question for the commission, honestly, is when you look at page 2, number 7, modifications to a single-family dwelling for apartment use shall maintain the appearance of the exterior. Is that something we carry over? Especially the public roadway facing facade? Like, do we carry that over?
I think so.
You don't think so?
I do.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, it's simple, so if
Which-
the house is on 100 acres and nobody can see it, it doesn't matter.
How does everyone feel
It's a regulation.
which shall have only one entrance and exterior stairways shall be located only on the rear or side of the building?
I don't mind 2 entrances in front. We used to have duplexes in Cornwall. In fact, there still are duplexes in Cornwall. Somewhere along the way, the right to have a duplex was removed in the 80s.
2 entrances doesn't even mean that you have 2, like,
And, you know, there
The
are
standard
roads.
house.
And it's a double door, 2 entrances.
Yeah.
Just make the doors look different.
I have, I have a walkout basement, it's got a door on the front side of the house.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
So let's be a little more reasonable and say that you could have 2 doors.
Yes, it doesn't say you can't have 2 doors. Read that again, Janelle, please.
It does.
But then most
It does,
people-
it says, it shall only have 1 entrance. This is for the interior accessory dwelling unit.
Part 7, or number 7.
Yeah, so this is, I'm sure there's many houses in town that have an interior accessory dwelling unit and there's more than 1 entrance.
The old houses had the pastor's door and the,
Plus, it would be difficult actually to have a
when
duplex.
that's the living room, you guys split
You
it.
would
I mean, it would be more complicated.
You would want more for safety.
Right.
Right.
True.
And then the stairs would be on the inside.
Yeah, if you have the old farmhouse that already has 2 doors, why not use that as natural
If we were
doorways
to,
into your...
if we were to get rid of 7, is there anything that would be lost?
What page is this on?
Page
2.
2.
Oh, no,
2D7.
Well,
Yeah.
I think one of the important things is we're only talking about 1 accessory apartment. So it's not that you can have,
4 family.
right?
Yeah, not making it 4.
It's not an apartment complex, it's a potential of an accessory apartment.
True.
And I mean, everyone, if you're modifying with an addition, you're allowed to change the appearance. If you're modifying with,
Yeah. Yeah, that side has to stay clabbered, but everything else can.
Well, they do that in Maine.
Yeah.
Right? put
And everything else is tar paper.
Tie that.
So it sounds like
We're gonna just
we're gonna
scratch
get
it.
rid of 7.
I mean, I can see that the appearance thing is very difficult to be able to control, but it's.
How about the
The eye of the
exterior
beholder.
stairway? Shall be
The eye of the
located.
beholder.
Exterior stairway down in the front, do we care about that?
Well, I read that and I said, why is that in there? And it begins to look like those buildings in Torrington where all the staircases and porches are on the back of the house, but it depends upon which road you approach it to, and it looks terrible. But I don't know if there's any
But-
reason not to do it.
But if, if your house is like mine, built into the side of the hill,
You got a stairway.
you gotta have a stairway up to the first floor on the.
And I think like Phil West is like that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't.
But then it would be,
I don't really think we should look at aesthetic.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
But the houses in Torrington, where you're seeing all the stairwells and stuff, that's called workforce housing. It's called affordable housing.
Let's not bully our neighbors in Torrington.
That's, you go through Torrington and that's what it is.
Yeah.
And that's,
Yeah, I'm
What
okay
they
with
have.
ditch and 7.
Scratch that
Okay.
all off.
All right. And so not to jump around, but one important point when we go back to this adaptive reuse section around parking requirements. So the wording was very heavy on requiring buffering and screening from off-street parking should the building be a building that had been converted into more units. I understand the intent, thinking there's going to be more people living there, but we don't require this for single-family homes, so why would we be requiring it for a converted?
that's what discriminate.
Exactly. Thank you. So I have taken liberty to strike that through because it seems like why is there a different standard for the same thing?
Probably exactly what I said.
So, okay.
Wow, those old commissioners were so illogical.
No, it's not one thing, it's,
James
James and I are some of those old
I know.
And then we get into our approval process, so, this is a tricky one for me, this in approval process and enforcement. So it states that the site plan and special permit for all apartment uses, it's page 3, you'll see H. It's valid for the time period that satisfied the occupancy requirement above. This would be null and void. And then also the approval shall become null and void if the lot owner or parent, spouse, child of the lot owner does not reside. I'm suggesting we strike through this because
Yes,
this
definitely.
is not even legal.
No.
And then
It
we get
was
into.
so legal 5-6 years ago, James.
Then we-
Mandatory, actually.
So then we get into the owner of the lot needing to notify the CEO. This is not valid either because it runs with the land, so any permit doesn't change because someone changes ownership. And then also, the CEO at the direction of the commission may inspect the apartment.
Not a chance. Not a chance.
We do not want to get into that business,
Oh,
so
no,
I'm
especially-
suggesting.
We used to escort Karen with our white hoods. Remember those days, right?
Yeah, if you go in there and you see something, and I'm the town attorney, I don't want to know what you saw.
Exactly, so I'm striking that,
I think, yeah.
just to be prudent. And then,
Not the drug enforcement officer.
oh, the one other text amendment change is that we would further hot link sections so that whenever we're referring to our accessory dwelling units, we will, such as in Article 4 with permitted uses, also mention, just link it to 10.1.
That's fabulous.
That they all blend together.
That way, when we're going to make a motion to approve an application, all those, it'll all be there. Those hot links will point you to what I have to say.
So is this what you were just talking about, the exterior modifications?
Yes.
Because Doesn't that
Yeah.
also need to be altered?
Thank you so much. Yeah, so then so Bruce just mentioned exterior modifications, which you also see on page 3. Because we're striking it from page 2, we're now getting rid of it.
But we're keeping the line above it, which is the maximum livable floor area shall be 200 square feet.
Indeed.
And then striking a bunch of stuff above that.
Yep, so this will be much simpler. And then one other thing I do want to note, it's way back on page 1. The definition is already within our updated regulations. We're now just also pulling it into this section. So accessory dwelling unit did get defined in our new updated regulations. This is just a carryover from how it was defined, and that aligns with Public Act 2129, which is sort of the state's standard of how they get defined.
I do
Question.
You put it 2119.
It should be 2125.
Question on the 1,200 square feet, going back to that. If you're splitting up a 7,000 square foot old Victorian or whatever was their example, how you get,
Yeah, how are you going to divide 7,000 by 1,200?
do you,
Livable, so I guess, yeah, because it's like, why is this number so important? The maximum.
I think the maximum should only be applied if it's an exterior structure.
An accessory,
because we're talking about conversions here.
No,
We're in the conversion section, why are we having 1,200 square foot?
it's a
You're
good
not
point.
changing the building.
Yeah, what do we care what happens inside the walls?
Yeah.
So James, to your point, does that mean we should update page 2, E1 to read an accessory dwelling unit, a detached accessory unit greater?
Right.
Because do we care if it's inside
No.
a massive house?
no.
No,
Okay.
no, that's a good catch.
And so then the section on apartment conversion will take out that line.
Great.
That's my opinion.
I think it's
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's right.
So my thought, so that everyone can digest this again,
You
is
need to
now
rewrite it.
that we've discussed all this, that I'll rewrite it and send out a clean copy. You can refer to this old copy so that you know where we were and where we're going, but I think it's a lot easier to truly understand what the proposed regulation would be when it's just a clean copy, and then it would be a good moment if we're missing anything about accessory apartments that should be
We'll give a
considered.
chance for the people who were here tonight to have a go at it.
Mhm.
I'm really impressed with how much progress we've
That was
made in
great.
a short list of
The
time.
one thing that gets in my brain though that I want to revisit, and this came up a lot when we were looking at the regulations, is driveways. Because with accessory apartments, if we don't stipulate that you have to use an existing driveway, if we don't catch that here and state that, we just want to make sure we're aligning with what the driveway regulations are saying. And if we need further stipulations, so that there's not suddenly 2 cuts for every lot, one driveway going to an accessory and one driveway going to a primary
Well, our
dwelling.
driveway regs won't allow that anyway.
So I just want to make sure we are using that language from, like reiterating it, just so it's really clear.
Okay,
So I'll make note to add something about driveway.
well,
Yeah, I don't know if that's,
Do we need to repeat ourselves
I
though?
don't know if we need to read, the
It's already
driveway
in there.
regs, I think we should catch it if
yes,
they have a
Yeah.
separate driveway on the plan.
we're not going to allow it.
Yeah, that's not,
I mean, sometimes it doesn't hurt to restate things. We've done it elsewhere, but I'll look at what. Yeah, I mean, it does read only one driveway shall be permitted to serve an individual lot, so that's pretty straightforward.
it was also, I think, a good catch that, just like tonight's application where the accessory dwelling unit needs their driveway, it needs to be accessible and the driveway needs to meet code and grade.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think,
Well, nothing else is stuff.
yeah, no, that's fair. As should be.
Aren't you also supposed to have one driveway to serve 2 lots?
You can, there's a provision.
Not
By,
very,
by special permit.
I thought we were forced to have one driveway for both my neighbor and our house.
A maximum of 2 lots may be served by a common driveway within the R3 or
Maybe we
R5.
can.
May.
Maybe.
The commission may allow by special permit not more than 4 lots to be served by a private street in accordance with subdivision regulations. So that was probably an agreement at the time of the subdivision.
Wasn't a subdivision.
If it was a free cut, then
It
it
was
was.
an existing drive. But, okay.
Is there, you have a right of way over it, or?
We had a right of way, yeah.
Yeah,
Whatever.
How long ago?
22 years.
a maximum of.
We're
2.
not responsible.
There was wetlands issues. There was wetlands.
There were wetland issues.
Yeah, and the environmental piece up there is we're seeing on Greenville Road.
Right.
In terms of.
Okay, so I
cannot do.
I won't talk about driveways, but everyone knows only one driveway per lot.
Except those lots that already have the circular driveways.
Right.
It's quite a few.
It makes for easy
Right.
and
And if you have a large acreage and 1,200 feet of road frontage, and you have a driveway that comes in, here's the house, here's the barn, here's, yeah, there's, if you look in the landscape, you can find.
If you look
All right, this is great. I'm really pleased with
it's a
how
clean copy.
good, much progress we've made. Could we just briefly touch on cannabis?
Before we close this, I have really one question. You know, we're doing this in order to be able to encourage more living spaces for younger people
And anybody.
and everybody else. But,
Yeah.
I mean, we have no control over what these apartments can be used for.
Right.
I had a little conversation with Karen about this, that, you know, what is the possibility that somebody who wants to spend the money to be able to build another building, to be able to house someone, is actually going to use it for a reasonable rent?
That's a
Very low.
conversation
Very
about
low.
the possibility of having regulations that would,
I guess the hope is though,
no,
And-
that would have some sort of a,
Can the guys at the end of the table hear you?
if the town has some sort of an affordable housing component that's governed by the body that could keep affordable covenants in certain accessory apartments and secondary units, and ensure that they would stay affordable, that is something that is being discussed.
The town of Salisbury has accessory apartments that are deeded affordable. I don't know how they convince people to do that, but I recently had a very long phone conversation with Jim Dresser, who, you know, he's like Mr. Affordable Housing, Mr. Housing Commission in Salisbury. And he said that it took 10 years to change the culture of the town to become more accepting of affordable housing. But now they're moving forward apace. But not to feel that we're behind it all. We still have a much higher percentage of affordable housing relative to our total housing count than Salisbury does. Our Cornwall Housing Commission has just done a superb job.
I think it's also, I don't know if it's a planning and zoning purview to try
I
to.
agree.
Right, so
Yeah.
that's not, I think it's, and it's also, I know of a couple examples where, you know, there's an accessory apartment that you think wouldn't necessarily be utilized for an accessory, for an affordable housing case, but then some years later, somebody's daughter asks if they can rent, and I got the space.
just
and
like the
next
guy
thing you know,
today.
and it works out great, so it's not, it does, we can do what we can do, and then I think in terms of, I'm not comfortable putting the borders on
I mean,
it.
I think we all know the need, and it's a little frustrating that we're changing regulations that probably won't help.
They might be surprised. I think a house conversion.
But what you said in Salisbury, and if you look at the players, the people that are involved in this, who have been working on it for years to change the climate, to change the perception.
Yeah.
So the first, and what happened in Cornwall, the first parcel lot, there was an appeal taken against it, right?
Some people see value in long-term tenants that are local, that are working, that are young,
Yes.
that are invested in their community.
Yeah.
And that's up to the goodwill of the people and to trust in that and lead by example. And just, if they want to have 5 tenants a year and jockey around the rent for various seasons because it's attractive to go to Cream Hill Lake, have at it, that will happen. But there's also many good people in this town that see the value in
Yes.
having a long-term renter and building that relationship and having that person have the ability to build that relationship in this community. So that's where,
And if you don't have the stock, like that guy that came in today, it won't happen. But if that guy comes in and builds his pool house, in 10 years it becomes his daughter's primary residence. Who is
Yeah,
affordable housing.
no, I happen to know somebody that just did that.
or
They just rented their house
I mean-
really cheaply for a young couple that has children.
life changes, like you
Yeah.
just don't know. At the time, it might be for their dad, and then later it might be for someone that comes along and is the perfect fit. And if it keeps them in their primary home, it's just better for the town as a whole. It's the ecosystem of the whole town.
You know, something came up, especially during COVID, and I faced this when my daughter was in medical school in Philadelphia, to get through the component that you have to go out and do rotations, whatever, to try and find a place that you could stay for the 8 to 12 weeks of rotation. Kathleen was fortunate to have, we have a family friend that she could go to, but that has come up in this town because there are several people that have talked about it because of the need for nurses and doctors that are coming into Sharon to keep the continuity of healthcare. And there are some people, especially some people who are doctors themselves, that realize that there is a need that they could satisfy. And when you start to create that climate that they see the need to have health, safety, and welfare, that people are not afraid to move to Cornwall because there's no hospital, there's not adequate staffing. That's how you have to look at it and encourage people to think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do know there's the anecdotal, the state, when they pushed forward Public Act 2129, they did it quickly, it wasn't thoughtful, and it was looking to create more housing, but the outcome didn't really achieve any of that.
So far.
So far.
It's in the paper today that the legislature has come out and said, we put it in, it's not cheap, what we need to do, we have to put it back on the plate and
Think again.
think again.
Yeah.
And that was, I guess it's come to the front of this new legislative session.
They're doing something similar with the cannabis regulation, which we're going to get to next. Just briefly, I don't think we need to belabor this. It'd be nice to get out at a decent time. But I did make a statement for the record about what I personally had concluded based on doing a bunch of research. And Karen has given you a copy of the information I found, what the other towns are doing about cannabis. And most of them are being extremely cautious, which I think is wise. And so I don't know if you're comfortable talking about what happened in Morris
Oh, sure.
this evening.
Yeah.
Would you tell them what happened?
I mean, the town, 2 different things were happening in the town at the same time. So there was a planning and zoning initiative to allow for it. And the commission talked at great lengths about where and what specific licenses. And then there was the parallel conversation of the residents that were hesitant to allow for it. So 2 things happening at once. P&Z working really hard on amending the regulations where appropriate to allow for it, and the rest of the town basically saying referendum, we need to vote no. And I mean, when town's residents are moving in 2 different directions, there tends to be duplicative work and conflicts, so that certainly happened. so they're sort of backpedaling now. The floodgates did open. They were recognized as a town that would be highly prioritized for these licenses because of the numbers and some data. So there was an application that did get fast-tracked as ag use. That is a production facility that's currently functioning. And since the town has pulled back, put out a referendum and basically shut any further licensing down, and did so quickly. And I mean,
It didn't look much like agriculture.
How big is the operation?
The warehouse is a big building with lots of lights inside, right?
Yeah, so it's a
That's-
very large greenhouse
Right.
on that agricultural land. With
Lots of lights.
chain link fencing per requirements
Right.
because of security measures that the state's requiring.
Not making it look like a prison.
Well,
Yeah,
that
so,
would be discriminating.
yeah. What's?
That would be discriminating. I like changing things. Well, go ahead.
So, I mean, long story short, essentially, they opened it, and then when it started to materialize, they realized this isn't really what we were thinking we were going to get. And furthermore, production doesn't yield that tax revenue, so the tax revenue is very specific to retail. So all of that production, the exchange, that monetary exchange isn't actually going back into the coffers of the town. That 4% is not earmarked for the town, so it's a business exchange, basically.
So these, I mean, I would imagine these commercial growers need a place to do this.
Sure.
Locally, you know, that, they don't want to go to Carolina and ship it up here. It's-
Well, they will find places. The most, right now, the state has suspended any further licenses while they try to straighten out all of the complications that have arisen. And it really is very, very big business. And only very big investment groups and groups that are already doing it in other states know how to do it and can afford how to do
They
it.
can't bank, so
Yeah.
they can't use traditional banking because it's illegal on the federal level.
I doubt it, yeah. So, what I've concluded is that we don't need to be in a hurry. And yes, our townspeople did say they were open to the idea in our survey, but I don't think, I mean, at the time that we wrote that survey, I didn't know what I know today, and I think if we have another moratorium, we're gonna know a lot more when some more time has passed, that the state will have straightened out what they're doing, and we'll be able to maybe see what's happening in some other towns, and not rush into this, because I think it might turn out to be a big mistake. But then on the other hand, on the other side of that is the way this several hundred page, or I can't remember how long it is, it's just very long. The way it reads, the amount of money and time and effort that would be involved in getting a license, nobody in their right mind would come to Cornwall. We're too teeny.
Right.
All the licenses are going to the cities in Connecticut. That's where the social equity, potential social equity partners are, the people who've been harmed by the former marijuana laws. That's where the money is. That's where the current dispensaries are, where people have experience doing this kind of thing.
And you know, the only problem I have, and I think I have this in a lot of other areas that we're going to be covering, is how can we dictate what businesses can and can't open in Cornwall? I mean, and do we really have, we need businesses. I mean, so is this a business? I mean, do we not want to have, you know, people renting out their houses? That's a business. I think it's difficult to be able to
This
To
it
say,
turns
no, we don't
out-
want that
Yeah,
business,
but
but
if
this
you,
is
if
okay.
you go and you look at the retail outfits in other places and you look at what those buildings look like, I don't think any of those would fit into either of our general business zones. We don't have the space.
You are making a very interesting point, because what is going on in both business zones, whether it be West Cornwall and Cornwall Bridge, is struggling to make the businesses that existed be able to continue, to improve, to modify. You've got parking issues, you've got all sorts of issues.
On the other hand, if there was a retail outlet for cannabis in either of those places, the through traffic would increase everyone's business tremendously.
We need to check, we need to fix all that zoning for business that's making it so difficult to be able to do, which is what you did for the big house, right? You all did before I was part of this.
It was a collaborative effort
Right.
to find.
Right.
But in Cornwall Bridge, for instance, there are huge issues in terms of just the lay of the land, how the highway comes, parking, pedestrian crossing.
As opposed to West Cornwall, which is just a wide open.
Well, West Cornwall, you know that you have to come to almost a dead stop before you come to West Cornwall. It's not, it's not.
I have always
At the same time.
maintained that if Cornwall Village was our business district, and we turned Pine Street into what Main Street in Millerton is like, that we could have tons of business here.
I wish I could have kept my business in Cornwall.
But it'll never happen.
You couldn't have, you had to
Cornwall
move out of
doesn't want
Cornwall?
that.
I'm closing down an office in Sharon this week.
What?
We tried, huh?
Yeah.
This is a teensy town. We have 1,002 dwelling units, houses in this town, according to the 2020 census.
Yeah, but aren't we trying to bring in more businesses?
Well, we are, but that's not the Planning and Zoning Commission's
Isn't it?
function. Our function is to make sure that the zoning regulations don't get in the way of businesses coming in.
Right.
When it comes to cannabis, I just think that we should take another moratorium.
I agree with that, sure.
Is there anybody around this table who thinks I'm wrong about that?
No, we have these delusions possibly of what this might do for us, and it might not turn out that way. So let's.
Delusions?
Yeah, so, you know, our neighbor Falls Village has enabled product manufacturing and food and beverage manufacturing, because they have some big old empty buildings that they'd like to get used, have them used. If we had any of those, we might consider that. North Canaan is going to have a referendum this November. Initial, and I know you've done some consulting work for them, because I saw their minutes. Initially, they were gung-ho. They thought the retail sales were going to be, you know, something really helpful for the town. But I guess they're having trouble wrapping their heads around it. In Litchfield, complete prohibition. And Sharon has a 6-month moratorium. You know, there are online cannabis business development companies now. There's this whole explosion of new consultants who are going to help all these poor social equity partners to learn how to become businessmen and to put through the applications and go through all the licensing requirements and develop all these plans. You know, they have to have how employees are going to be treated. The law is very, very specific, and the law also has all of these features to protect the social equity partners from being taken advantage of by the big boogeyman businessmen. And they've created something called the Social Equity Council that is going to be paid for by the revenues from the $1 to $3 million licensing fees. And that Social Equity Council is going to be a big brother to put their arm over the social equity partner and teach them how to become good business people and run a business. But they have yet to start working on that part. The law, it was basically, this law, in my mind, is a social program for Connecticut, and it's being paid for through the licensing process by allowing cannabis sale.
Isn't smoking bad for your health?
Pardon me?
What happened to that?
So it's fascinating to get into what's actually happening, and I think there's chaos in Hartford, really. I tried to communicate with the director of the Office of Policy and Management about the moratoriums and whether or not we could extend ours. And the answer I got made no sense whatsoever. It was like she didn't know anything about moratoriums. So, and she was mad at me for asking. I think if we have a public hearing, I think we have a right to extend our moratorium.
Yeah.
And can we set a date for public hearing, or would you rather wait a month and talk about this next month? We need to get this done by November 1st.
Sooner the better.
Yeah.
I should bring this up at this point. There is something that is moving forward quickly. The Board of Selectmen will be discussing some work with the Little Guild in order to move the rebuild of the Little Guild forward, and it will require a special permit for them to move forward to possibly house, the dogs elsewhere while
They want to put some trailers on Footfield while the Little Guild is being rebuilt.
Yeah.
For several months.
And so it will have to go to public hearing, and I did bring up the fact that there's a time frame. It is conceivable that things could be noticed outside of the 1 month, that we could do it in less than the 2 month where we set the public hearing per month. We could shorten it up to, we could try if we have to.
I mean, because they have a deadline when their construction is supposed to
Yeah,
start.
so we want to do that first, that's fine.
Yeah, we're gonna take that first.
Yeah.
But, it's possible to do 2 public hearings in 1 meeting.
My thinking around that public hearing is, with the moratorium not yet expiring, you have to have when you're extending it to.
Yeah.
So just bear in mind, if you're coming in for a public hearing way before it's set to expire,
Yes,
knowing,
so maybe do it the last minute.
I mean,
Well,
maybe give yourself a little cushion should the
I was
schedule
just
become heavy.
Picturing a whole series of public hearings, because the enthusiastic peak 70% of our residents who wanted to have cannabis businesses in town might show up at the
I
public
don't know.
hearing and
I
give
don't
us a
know.
hard time.
Yeah,
I don't know that you're really,
I would build in some
All
buffer.
right, so aim
Yeah.
for September?
Yeah, September, October, if it's
Yeah.
due in November.
Yeah,
those two.
aim for September.
And then I would just know what's on the table so that it can be properly noticed. Is it 12 months? Is it?
12 months seems too little to me now, given the chaos and how long it's going to take to shade out. And some other towns have 18-month moratorium. I'd go for 18.
I mean, if we have a moratorium, we decide to be able to.
Well,
do something
we
earlier,
can stop at any time before then
Right.
if we start, seeing the outcomes in other places.
Sure.
I mean, Connecticut has had sales for 6 months. So I would just, it's a 6-month
They're
period.
bringing in $11 million a month in revenue.
Less than Massachusetts. When it hit Massachusetts, it was like wildfire, and, it was like a gold rush. I imagine once, the other states do it, and it just, Rhode Island.
We used to drive through Great Barrington and there were lines like down the street, but now you don't see that.
New
as
York
much
took
either.
a while to launch because New York opened the gates a while
How
ago.
long did New York do?
It took them a while to navigate all the laws. I'd have to Google that one.
But once they will get their, their infrastructure for, it won't be flooding all over the, it's easier. But I think the longer you look, the better too.
Can I?
Yes, do you have your whole book with you?
This is everything.
I would love one.
Oh, very nice, thank you.
I like mine on paper.
Oh,
Yes,
I love
please.
that.
Who has a copy of the new town plan? Do you have the new town plan? That's the old one.
That's 2010.
You have to have 29.
I don't think so.
Okay. Why doesn't everybody give me a list of what they're missing in their book? If you want to keep your 2010, which is lovely, you can certainly do that. And then put 2020 in maps that take a lot of space. You have a book at home, I'm sure that you're going to put in.
Yeah.
Mr. Sakari, what are you going to do with yours?
I got a book updated.
Okay, and you're going to tell me what else you need?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that what you just got?
Yeah. Wait, this one's different.
That's the right.
Well, why is
Oh, wait, I
this-
think I just missed the back page, I'm sorry.
Can I take the lead?
Yeah, take a look at the back page. Minutes.
Article
We
13.
have to have a public hearing to amend the amendment list.
We should just do it when we have another one.
Yeah, I thought about that. Janelle, do you have your own copy?
She'd like to
I
copy.
do, but if you have a nice beauty one and you don't mind, maybe this is a nice one. Yeah, it's fancy. Because I read in mine, so two copies to
Is
her.
there one more?
Yeah,
Very
we've got
nice, very
plenty.
nice.
I was,
So he says they trust.
I covered one.
Should we take a motion to continue this after the meeting is officially closed?
I meant that we.
Adjourn. I have a motion to adjourn. I see that Bruce Bennett is seconding. All in favor?
What are we doing?
That's it, right?
Yes, I